Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Driving More Display Ad Conversions with First-Party Data. This webinar will last approximately 60 minutes and will be recorded for your on-demand viewing after the event is over. Our presenter today is Ted Speakus. Ted is the North American Director of Telium Solution Consultants Organization. He has over 17 years of experience with a number of leading organizations within digital marketing, social platforms, SaaS-based firms, ITSM portfolios, and automated quality assurance technologies. Prior to joining Telium, Ted worked in a number of senior-level advisory positions for Computer Associates and HP, where his focus was centered on lean IT methodologies throughout financial, healthcare, manufacturing, and retail industries. Ted, let's get started.
Thanks, Julie, and thank you all for coming here today. As Julie mentioned, we are going to be discussing how display ad conversions can be better driven using first-party data.
Before we dive into the display ad ecosystem, let's take a closer look at a typical customer journey in most organizations today. If you read this from left to right, you can see 5 different phases that we are interested in tracking a prospect or a user as he or she becomes a loyal user. And it starts with awareness, moves into a consideration phase where they consider whether buying the product or not based on the marketing that has been performed and the word of mouth that has taken place. And then into purchase, where they actually make the conversion and purchase the product thanks to paid content, social media, mobile channels, and even some physical realms such as direct mail or in-store branches. Then the flow continues well into the nurturing campaign aspect of a customer journey, where we typically see technologies such as the website itself integrate personalization techniques in order to make retargeted areas more appealing, as well as emails themselves that speak to the state of the customer's journey into the service realm. Even chat and more social techniques, such as advertisements appearing on a customer's wall, take place at this point in time. Loyalty, the end game of this journey, occurs as call centers and help desks, direct mailing, even so far as courtesy calls, a mechanism for feedback such as surveys, and ongoing cross-selling and upselling opportunities available in weekly newsletters will all be appearing in the loyalty phase of this journey. One thing you've noticed with the gray bars on the top and the bottom, it's both the digital and the physical realm that matter for a complete and cohesive journey along this life cycle. It's not just one or the other. Data flows in and out of both the digital and physical realms as a customer proceeds from awareness to loyalty and traverses through many different technologies to make that happen. Now that we've understood the customer journey and all the kinds of things that are taking place that require data to be coordinated and orchestrated along the line, where is it all going to? What are the things that we're using to reach out to our customers and interact with them in meaningful ways? You can see that the content is the center of the digital marketing channel. Everything depends on good, rich content. And you can get some of that content from your own domain properties, your own websites, your own mobile apps, your own offline data storages. But they also need to get transmitted into the digital marketing channels to actually engage. And we see all around the content circle all the different channels that are meaningful in today's industry, such as social platforms with ads and profiles in those walled gardens. The email retargeting that takes place where we acquire emails through lists and newsletters, affiliate sites that have a content network base which drive new visitors to your website domains, and then search and display highlighted in green to give you an indication that this is where display ad retargeting typically takes place. When people perform searches on popular search engines and AdWords come back as a result, or when publishing websites on popular news.coms appear with banner ad inventory ready to display a contextual advertisement creative It is these highlighted in green that make the most sense for display ads to occur. And that's because paid media of this nature is typically display ad, and that's where display ad shines. Thinking of the display ecosystem in general, it is sophisticated and very, very interesting to dive deep into, which is what we're going to do today. This is an ecosystem that took place for 20 years in the making to become the digital ecosystem that it is today and to incorporate the physical realm of data. It's about buyers and sellers coming together in a programmatic fashion over ad exchanges and interesting acronyms like DMP, DSP, SSP, and CDP. We're going to learn all about those next and understand their role in this exciting ecosystem. Before we do that, let's do a short history of how we got here. It all started circa 1993 when banner ads were hard-coded by engineers themselves. You'd have a website and somebody would rip apart that code and add in the actual creative. And it all began that way. And you can see the animation above 1993. We all remember that if we were in those days. It encouraged you simply to click without any contextual meaning. And that's how it all began with static ads. Moving forward into 95 and 98, we had kind of a breakthrough with ad servers and ad networks that took place for dynamic ad rotation. This was important because now the advertisers that were willing to pay money for their ads to be placed on the internet had a automated way to actually push those creatives into a place where the suppliers of that inventory could access them. And so the ad server gave access to the ad networks that aggregated them all together. Circa 2000, the waterfall piggybacking approach for rotating dynamic ads and monetizing unsold inventory was starting to happen. And that's really when ad exchanges came into being in 2005. Such popular names as Facebook and AppNexus and OpenX, DoubleClick from Google, Rubicon, and Microsoft themselves got into the game. These ad exchanges took aggregation one step further. And now we had ad networks themselves, multiple ad networks rolling into these ad exchanges, whereby those technology labels that you see there could automate their proliferation. Around 2007 to 2009, social hit the scene, and that's when DSPs came into being. This aggregated the demand from a very large source. Companies like MediaMath and Rocket Fuel and AppNexus and DoubleClick, all of them were now building the actual awareness of buyers programmatically interacting with ad exchanges. And then we move down to the bottom and we see in 2008, all along that timeline, there had to be some kind of solution powering the SSPs, the supply side, and the DSPs, the demand side, so that they could come to terms and understand what was for sale and how much people were willing to pay for it. That data, which brought those two buyers and sellers together, were called DMPs, and that was a centralized platform that aggregated the anonymous data, scrubbed clean for privacy, that was allowed to be detected and shown on internet websites. In 2015, we're making even more headway in optimizing this approach. That's when header bidding came out. There were multiple publishers now vying for the buy side's attention, not just Google, and they wanted a fair shot at those bids. So header bidding came into play and leveled the playing field so that the bids took place in the header of the web page rather than taking place in the body where more speed was required. So header bidding changed the waterfall approach and made the playing field in this ecosystem more fair. And that leads us to the display formats that we're seeing. We're still seeing all of these nowadays, whether it's a banner on a popular news site like CNN or a video that takes place on YouTube, rich media on publishing websites, text links that appear through search engines based on your query, pop-ups that appear to grab your attention and drive you towards the right multivariate pathway that you may have chosen. Custom ads that are based on contextual understanding of your visit and how it relates to the segment that you belong to. And even roadblocks that suppress entry into a website like interstitials that appear on some of the more popular paid publishing websites for the content they offer. All of these are forms of display. And they fall right in line with a very nice Lumascape that we have seen created over the last couple of decades. This only speaks for a minor part of what's out there today. We have close to 4,000 vendors all competing in different areas of that timeline. Agencies, trading desks, DMPs, analytics, ad networks, publishing tools, SSPs. The sky's the limit. Personalization tools exist here too, and there's multiple vendors. You can buy them in stacks and stick with one giant vendor, or you can do best of breed and go with a multitude of different capabilities that you feel are more suited for your organization. In either case, the marketer and the publisher are eventually going to come together in the middle. And the way they'll do that is they'll do it through data. That is the key focus of 2017 and onwards. Now that we've got this infrastructure, let's power it with data that's meaningful and makes sense in the context that we're advertising in. Let's talk about the three different kinds of data that we're dealing with. On the left-hand side, we have first-party data. This is owned data. You own it, you've created it, you're tracking it. Perhaps you purchased a tag management system to capture it and save it somewhere so that you can reuse it later. But in any case, this data is free. You already paid for the technology to do the tracking, and you have labor and personnel that do the analysis on it and build useful profiles. It's very rich data, it's very deep, and it goes as far down as you need it to in order to understand the first-party personas that come to your own websites. Moving to the middle, we're seeing a cooperative take place with second-party data. So you've got a bunch of first-party data on your website. Well, so do a lot of other companies. In fact, hundreds and thousands of them. Wouldn't it be great if we could all share this data, as long as privacy was maintained, to understand the behaviors of customers very much like yours and prospects very much like yours on other sites? And so second-party data is really a mechanism of co-op capabilities where industries come together and share what they know about their personas. It's not as well structured as some first-party data, but it depends. Perhaps other companies structure their first-party profiles differently than you, and you'll end up learning something more about them. This is the value of second-party data. There's always something more to discover, even if they're not capturing as many data points as you are, because they're on different areas of the network. And finally, the display ad ecosystem that we have come to know and love today uses third-party data. This is neither first nor second. It's borrowed data. It's purchased data. When you decide to use third-party data to run a display ad campaign anonymously on news websites, you're not going to know the name and the age and the demographic in many cases. All you'll know is a silhouette of an identity, somebody who comes in, and although you don't know their name, third-party data still tracks their behaviors and the attributes that they've earned from those behaviors. And so those third-party data sets are indeed useful. The best thing about third-party data is it's big. You get a lot of it, and you pay a price for it because you didn't collect that data. You had other people collect it for you, other companies, and you're buying it from them so that you can detect those same anonymous users as they navigate throughout the internet and instantly advertise to them. So there's value in all three kinds of data, and all three of them will be needed to run an effective digital marketing campaign. The buy side and the sell side, they have competing goals, and it's a good time to pause and understand what each of them want from each other. The buy side of a digital marketing ecosystem are advertisers. They're companies that want to sell you products. They want to protect their brand and nurture it. Their goals are to maximize the ROI of their efforts. They want to make sure that their advertisements are seen in all the most popular places on the internet, and that those advertisements are timely and come to the right users. They also want to protect their brand. Display is not only about acquisition. It's not only about companies saying, here's the name of my product, you should come to my website and buy it. It should also be shown to people who have already chosen to do so and continue to make them come to the site. Very different marketing strategies, but at the end of the day, the key performance indicators, or the KPIs, are the same. In both cases, the advertisers, or the buy side, are looking for increases in conversion. They want people to look at that ad, click it, and buy something when they get there. And the percentage of those conversions are intended to rise the more you spend on display advertisement. The other key performance indicator, which gives advertisers an idea of how good their chances are for converting people, is something called reach. Reach is simply the pool of cookies, which are anonymous users that are being collected, that you have acquired as a company. You have purchased 10 million cookies from a cookie pool in the third-party data, and you are going to activate your advertisements against that entire pool. That's a great reach because you have millions and millions of people that you'll potentially reach. On the sell side, this is where the publishers live. These are different areas of the ad tech ecosystem. Publishers are the websites that actually have inventory slots ready to host your ad if you're a buyer. And so a publisher is typically a news site or even an aggregation consumer site that actually routes you to different competitive e-commerce or other service-related industries. But at any rate, a publisher website is designated by the amount of area they dedicate to their ads. And publishers have different goals than advertisers. Publishers want to maximize their yield. They want to get the most bang for their buck depending on who comes to their site. If they have 100 people come in and read a news article, they want to be able to detect how that user is coming in, what their attributes are, what they did before, and what segment they belong into. If they can know that, they can actually expose those attributes to the advertisers and give the advertiser confidence that the inventory slot they're about to buy is meaningful and that their ad belongs there. So they want to maximize the yield. They never want to leave any inventory slot empty. They want people to buy it, and they're willing to change the bids for those inventory slots, higher or lower, in order to increase the maximum yield they can possibly produce. They also want to protect the users that are arriving on the site. It's critical that publishers maintain a semblance of privacy and control on the user's behalf. And so they're always balancing the need to expose the fact that they are using cookies and detecting your cookies in exchange for you reading the valuable articles that you're reading on those sites. And so those are the two goals, is to bring confidence to their website and maximize that yield. Their key performance indicator is going to be something called the cost per meal, or cost per thousand. And that CPM acronym indicates 1,000 impressions. An impression is every time a set of eyeballs looks at that ad. And every time that happens, that's an impression. And so publishers will sell their inventory slots based on CPM. They'll sell 1,000 slots to people for a certain amount of money, or to different companies or agencies. And so the KPI here is, how much did we get for a CPM today? Did we improve our segmentation? Were we able to tell the advertisers, hey, look, we've got a lot of people coming to our site looking for trips to Disneyland. All of you airplane and hotel advertisers out there, you should advertise with us. If you were successful in doing that as a publisher, your CPM will go straight through the roof, and that's what you want. Related to that is the fill rate, the percentage of traffic actually served an ad. That's very obvious. You never want to leave an ad slot unturned. So an ad server is used by advertisers and publishers alike. Advertisers will use ad servers to manage their ads, their creatives, in a centralized solution. This ad server can track the number of impressions that the advertising campaign is creating. And very simply, the publisher will also use an ad server, except the publisher will use it to grow and scale the ad operations by allowing ads to rotate in and out of those inventory slots. Very simple, and it's all powered by something called an ad tag. It's a line of code that you place inside your HTML page that instructs the ad server where to get the creative and where to publish it. You'll see some sample vendors like Atlas and DoubleClick playing in this space. Ad networks is an aggregate of all those ad servers. So multiple ad servers working with multiple agencies and multiple advertisers all come together into a single network. And the network is sold as a kind of a brand for the publishers, and say, here's an ad network for cars, here's an ad network for holidays. And so publishers now have a contextual means in which to offer their inventory into this network. It's a great idea. Yahoo, Google run exceptionally well their ad networks, but other players in the best of breed space like advertising.com do so as well. One big problem in ad networks is that there's very little transparency between the buyer and the seller, and this drives increased costs and conflicts of interest. Advertisers don't really know where their ad ends up at on the publisher site. And we've heard the stories about that in the industry. It can cause a lot of conflicts when that happens. But at any rate, these ad networks act as an arbitraging middleman. They allow for the exchange of dollars for impressions. The advertisers pay their money through the ad network, and the publisher fulfills that creative on their site. We went one step further and we decided to put it all into one more aggregation. As time went on, ad networks grew and they started competing with each other, and it became necessary to invent something called the ad exchange. An ad exchange aggregates all of the inventory from all of the networks in this case, and all of the publishers, and makes it available for a programmatic purchase. So now we've got one huge exchange being offered by multiple news websites all over the globe to all of the advertisers who are also participating and have access in that network. One big difference with an ad exchange is that, again, in circa 2012 to 2015, we began moving into the programmatic arena of buying and selling. Ad exchanges such as AppNexus and OpenX and Google DoubleClick, they were the forefathers of this new technological approach. Now you can program how much you want to buy, how much you want to bid for, and when you want to stop and push go. At the same time, the publishers can also program and say, this is how much I want to sell for, and this is the limit and the minimum that I'm willing to sell my inventory, go. And the ad exchange keeps all of that in context. In order to work with the ad exchanges, demand-side platforms had to be created. The demand-side platform is a tool used only by advertisers in order to interact with the ad exchanges that I just explained to you about. DSPs, in other words, are centralized platforms that enable the programmatic media buying and planning of ad exchanges. So they basically connect all of the advertisers in the world today, the buyers, the brands, the agencies, directly to the ad exchangers, which are being populated by the publishers. That's how programmatic RTB takes place, and that stands for real-time bidding. So if I'm a brand and I hire an agency to represent my brand, that agency will likely have a DSP, and it'll program the DSP to buy inventory space from publishers advertised on an ad exchange in order to show my ad. And some of the big sample vendors, the big players we see here are the Trade Desk. Once again, there's Google with its bid manager. MediaMath in turn have also made good inroads into the DSP market. And at the bottom of it all is the DMP, the data management platform. It sits on both sides of the equation. It's the neutral body that supplies the segments or the audiences that lets the demand side and the supply side know these are the people that are looking for the ads, and these are the people that are arriving to your site. And so when those two pieces of information come together, when the same person arrives on the publisher website, the DMP is going to fuel the data that allows the DSP to bid for that person's eyeballs, and allows the SSP to understand that the inventory slot is optimized for that person as well. Popular vendors here include DataZoo, Exalate, Lotame, and BlueKai. So bringing it all together, the buy side and the sell side, they all meet in the middle, and the DMP fuels that data that allows them to make that exchange. The agency Trade Desk, in-house or otherwise, will use ad networks, and the ad networks will connect to DSPs that talk to SSPs. And together, real-time bidding can take place only because a DMP has provided segmented data that appears for both the DSP buy side and the SSP sell side that makes it all happen and allows the bid to happen. This all happens in milliseconds as your web page is rendering. It's actually quite amazing how quickly this takes place behind the scenes, how quickly the bid for the creative for your eyeballs are being made on every news site in the world. Now let's dive a little bit deeper into that data that we talked about, because this is where this webinar is going. We want to talk about the missing element that's going to make this whole process have much more accuracy so that we know precisely who we're looking at. Right now, data used in ad tech is kind of a silhouette, and you see that with a question mark on this image of a person here. You know that the segmented things, such as here's 10,000 people that have indicated they liked cars. I'm not going to give you their names, but I have proof that they went onto car websites and looked at them. Same with always reading, same with news sites, same with being interested in shoes or some other product. You'll always have third-party data that anonymously lives on that allows me to see segmented things such as my likes and my dislikes, the websites I visit, and so forth and so on. This is happening right now. It's useful because companies buy this data when they want to advertise to people who are, for example, interested in shoes. If you're a shoe store, you sure as heck would like to buy 10,000 pieces of data to advertise to people who have indicated interest in shoes. And that's what third-party data is nowadays, and that's what DMPs use. It's a very important distinction to make. CDPs do not use this data. CDPs are customer data platforms, and they fit into the ecosystem quite differently. And you can read this again from left to right. CDPs actually don't allow a company to purchase data. CDPs collect data for companies on their own domains. That's the difference. CDPs work with first-party data. Let's see how this works. On the left-hand side, you can see every single data source that a CDP can fit into, whether it's a browser, a mobile app, an IoT device such as a video game system, a telephone, or an offline point of sale system that spits out data into a CSV file. It doesn't matter to the CDP. The CDP will ingest and process all of the data that comes from these systems. And one of the key things that it'll do, one of the key capabilities is what we call identity resolution. In all of those record sets that the CDP is pulling on, the sessions that you gave the CDP access to on a website, or the app swipes that you performed on the brand's app, we capture all of that in a CDP and we look for your identity. Things like your email address that you provided when you logged into the mobile app. Things like the customer ID that the CMS on the website dropped when you first authenticated. Or even with applications such as ad tech systems like Criteo, which throw down unique IDs when they successfully engage with you. Social platforms like Facebook. Everybody's unique on Facebook and everybody's got a hashed ID for Facebook. And there are many ways for first-party websites to acquire that Facebook ID. The key here is that all of these identity keys get slid onto the same digital keyring. It's a deterministic keyring. That's the big difference with the CDP. Every time you come onto the website and you give me a new piece of identifying data, I create a brand new key and slide it on this ring. And as time goes by, this ring gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're able to detect you wherever you go on any website if we cooperate with the technologies that are working on those websites. And we'll talk about that shortly. But for now, follow the left to right. You can see that despite the devices in the middle, we do a process called visitor stitching of these identities, and we stitch together the profiles of different identities, and we understand that it's actually one user. This is how we know when somebody comes into a website and doesn't log in, but has the same hashed email in their cache, that it's the same person who used the mobile app to log in 3 days ago. And so the more IDs that you capture, the more complete your visitor profile is, and the more deeper and sophisticated the outcome that we want from this is CDPs don't stop there. If they did, it would be great. You'd have a big file full of rich first-party data, but most CDPs will follow through and actually push that data to technologies like the DMPs that we were talking about, like the DSPs that we were talking about. Anything out there, whether it's a big data, a warehouse, a data lake, an analytics tool, CRM tools, ESPs, search, or social, these are integrations that are built into the CDP where not only can first-party data move out towards to, but do so based on conditions such as qualifying criteria for advertising to. So you can see how powerful a CDP is and how it complements a DMP. We can actually incorporate an identity lifecycle, a very popular one in the industry today, moving from the unknown to known. And that's where users start off as anonymous, and slowly but surely, as they leave more breadcrumbs behind and we start to pick up their identity, they become unknown at first, but then they become known as they visit the website more often. They turn into leads when we actually see that they're interested in specific areas of our product offerings, and they've shown behavioral traits over time that we have captured and stitched together with their profile that we are keeping track of in real time on the server side. And ultimately, we want to convert and have them become a customer. And the techniques that we use to do so can be anywhere from personalization tools, offering in-house specials, offline and online, or by advertising in a display ecosystem. The choice is yours. The best thing about a CDP is it'll allow you to perform this in a funnel process. You can go and multi-channel and try out something less expensive like an email retargeting at first when an identity is just unknown. All we have is the email. But as they become known and they become more valuable, you can use marketing automation systems or personalization technologies to increase the conversion factor that you need to make them become customers. So that identity lifecycle is one of the first kind of scenarios that you'll be able to take advantage of with a CDP. So let's dive deep into a DMP. We know that they're not alike. It's apples and oranges. A DMP deals with third-party anonymous data, while a CDP knows precisely who they're dealing with, its first-party data. But let's take a look at why a DMP targets the way they do versus why a CDP targets the way they do. If you look at the y-axis here, as the number of people increase, i.e. the reach continues to increase, and it goes from few to many, you see there's an inverse relationship with the purchase intent. The purchase intent will go from lower to higher, but you'll have less people involved according to this graphic. Why does that happen? Well, if you're given 10 million sets of data, it's impossible that all 10 million of those people are qualified as wanting to buy your product. You've paid for third-party anonymous data, what we call basic data. You're paying for a demographic, a geographical feature, perhaps a gender is known, or the page content that they're constantly looking at certain things. But that is not deterministic, it's probabilistic evidence. And so it never turns out to be 100% purchase intent, but the reach is very high because plenty of people come onto websites and look at trips to Hawaii. Doesn't mean they're interested in them. That moves us on to the next phase into audiences. We start to drill down deep and start to get more context about this basic audiences. Tell us about the past interaction. Tell us about the interest that you have with certain content on my page over time. That's where CDPs come into play, and that's where we can start getting more purchase intent. But as you can see, as purchase intent increases, we've lowered the reach from many to just a little bit less than that. As it moves forward into behavioral aspects, we can form lookalike audiences that a first-party CDP repository can seed a third-party DMP with. We can actually detect the funnel position that a first-party profile is in and gain a more behavioral understanding of our user. Once again, purchase intent increases, you've lost a lot more reach in exchange. It's a trade-off. Ultimately, the retargeting, an active and accurate retargeting for maximum accuracy will occur. You'll have a great deal of intent somewhere in the mid-range and probably about 20 to 30% of the original reach. And so DMPs and CDPs, they're a trade-off as they work together and put this to work. This graphic shows you how a DMP works. It is a segment-based technology. It starts with a segment such as, I want to know about my Disneyland users. You see it on the right-hand side. Tell me everybody who has looked at a trip to Disneyland on my vacation website. Also create a segment that tells me about people who have looked to be traveling in August. I can have two different segments. I can have 3 or 4 segments that put these two together. At any rate, you start at that context. You say, just show me people who have done this. On the flip side, the DMP then tries to map third-party anonymous data into these segments. You see that on the left with user ID being 1234. I don't know who this guy is, but I know that he looked at Disneyland at one point on my site. I know that he looked at an August vacation on somebody else's site. He's anonymous, but I want him because there's a high likelihood that he'll be interested in a display ad that I'll show him. That's how a DMP works. That's how it remains anonymous. DMPs will then define something called a taxonomy. They'll start to build out the segments. You can see it working from the top. I want to have third-party data that's in market. I want the person to be interested in travel, and specifically, I'd really like to know about segments that are interested in Hawaii in general, because I've got this creative that's advertising a Hawaii vacation for a sale price. Great. I also want to know geography and demographics. For example, this campaign ad that I've got has been shown to resonate most with people who have children in their family, specifically 1 to 3 children. If you can give me third-party anonymous data, I don't need to know their name. I just need to know that they've looked at things for kids that indicate that they have multiple children in the family. And so you can see what the predefined taxonomy is trying to do. It's trying to create a campaign target that multiple segments fit under. This is how a business feels comfortable using a DMP. It's got millions of pieces of data. It knows that not all of this data is relevant, but it knows that most of it is going to be interested in at least one or more segments that they're going to be advertising the display to. That's the only way to run display in an anonymous fashion of this nature. How can we make it better, which is what this webinar is all about? Well, the CDP can be used to enrich those segments I just showed you. A CDP is different from a DMP. We're not segment-centric, we're customer-centric. A CDP has a master record in it. It's called a user, and that's all a CDP cares about. Whether you're user 1, 2, 3, 4 or user 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 anonymously, at some point we're going to know who you are precisely. We'll get your name, we'll get your address, we'll get your technology IDs, with all the technologies dropping their unique IDs, and you can see what a CDP is trying to do on the right-hand side. I don't just want to know all these attributes and behaviors. That's great, but I'd like to know the name of this person. In fact, the name is Chris. His email is chris.slovak@gmail.com. He's actually in the first phase of his funnel process. He hasn't even started the second. The last time he came on my site was yesterday. This is fantastic data. It's drilled down. It's deep. I'll be able to say, by the way, this person, Chris, looked at Disneyland 5 times in the last month and actually clicked on the Hawaii vacation package you were offering 3 times in a week. Hasn't yet decided on a hotel, even though you're offering the Marriott at a discount. We've actually designated Chris as a cart abandoner. Why? He's put something in your cart on his website and he's killed the browser. He's done that a couple of times. He's also a Disney fan. He keeps reading more and more information about Disneyland, which makes sense because our other indications show that he went to the Disneyland page 5 times. This is the kind of data that you're going to get. You'll know about him being a big spender versus a low spender, being someone who prefers the activity of surfing over the activity of something else. That's the kind of behavioral attribute that you get from a CDP that's different from a DMP. There are key differences there. The DMP has a segment-first approach. The CDP is a real-time user-first approach. DMPs use cookies. CDPs do identity and profile targeting, and they know precisely who they're dealing with. DMPs do page retargeting. CDPs will wait till the end of session and immediately react in real time because CDPs have the ability to understand who they're dealing with and how to contact them. It's not anonymous in that case. DMPs do audience removal once they view the display ad. Once those eyeballs see the display, DMP's job is done. Not a CDP's. CDP will consider audience removal only if it's double-checked that all devices are in play and also that all devices were considered when looking at the display ad. So that means that a CDP can understand and stitch across domains and platforms, whereby a DMP is only going to consider its job done when the creative comes up. Offline data considerations are also something different between the two. The DMP's data considerations are limited because they're dealing with anonymous people inside cookies. Their identities live in cookies. And so the match rates to actually interacting with somebody that you truly want to are low. In addition, when you bring in offline data in a DMP, that doesn't happen in real time. In fact, it takes quite a long time to actually feel confident that you've got the right segments and purchased the right anonymous data. Completely different world in the CDP sense. Offline data is instantly stitched to a real-time profile. So I can get CRM data from a system and say, here are 3 phone calls that Chris placed to our travel agency today. Here's the things he talked about, column A, column B, column C, go. That gets instantly stitched to the digital profile, and the digital and physical worlds come together in the CDP. Big difference in that respect. Another big difference is in fraud. Today there's a big problem with bots proliferating the internet and fooling internet sites that they are actually real people. Why? Because bots are cookies. And so an anonymous user could just as well be a bot as it could be a real user. That's a big problem and is very few ways for a DMP to detect that. Whereas a CDP, by definition, we're not going to give any credence to a cookie until that cookie actually signs in with a username, has validated their email address, perhaps has a social handle login. There are many different ways to detect fraud using first-party data. And that's why it's, again, apples to oranges. A CDP approaches this problem of fraud quite differently. Data orchestration across the lifecycle in a CDP is quite different from the acquisition orchestration from a DMP as well. Two different types of orchestration. Keep in mind, a DMP is trying to acquire people to come to your website. They are in the awareness phase. The CDP has a much bigger responsibility. The CDP's orchestration is across the entire life cycle of awareness, consideration, conversion, and ultimately brand loyalty and service. It has to be there every step of the way, telling the DMP what stage of the funnel the user is in, what has changed about the user. And the users, as we know, continue to change throughout that life cycle. A DMP has a very static view in that orchestration aspect, and the CDP is very dynamic. And that leads up to the final point. DMPs are going to be mostly valued for their play in second and third party data. They are combining anonymous information shared by multiple different organizations and advertising to them based on limited data sets. CDPs are useful because they contain first party data, and that combines a profile enrichment in real time that can be used to seed a DMP segment. We can use a CDP to say, hey, look, here's 50,000 email addresses that match your cookies. Don't bother advertising to them. We saw that they actually already bought a trip and they're going somewhere else other than Hawaii. So it's not either or. You need both. I get this a lot in the industry. Should I buy a DMP or should I buy a CDP? And the answer is you need both. They are used for different things across the life cycle, and they both have value. It depends on what your needs are today. The CDP is going to be used for much more than simply display ad advertisement. It's a completely different ballgame. The CDP at the intersection will ultimately combine three key capabilities for a universal hub of data to operate in. Those three capabilities are data collection, data enrichment, and data activation. What does that mean? It means that we will unify collecting data at any source, whether that be an offline or an online, a physical or a digital. If it's a browser, a mobile app, an iWatch, a point of sale system, it doesn't matter to the CDP. All that data arrives. And the key way is that data layer that you see right there in the middle of data collection. That data layer represents a kind of proxy between what's happening in real time and what you need in your organization. For the first time in your organization, you're going to have a way to call a timeout on data coming into it and say, first you have to comply with the data governance practices that we demand in this organization in order to perform effective marketing. So tell me, is the page title here? Is the page URL? Do I have a client ID? Do I have a device type? If so, let me translate that and then bring it into the blue bar, the data enrichment, and let me enrich that data. Now I ask the questions in the middle, inside the CDP, where the CDP lives. I have digitized business rules, as you can see, that I can actually implement and enrich the data and understand, is this the same user? Does this user belong in an audience? Has this user indicated interest based on the behaviors that the business has determined to be indicative of their need to be advertised to? We're also stitching first-party profiles here, a huge identity resolution value add that takes place so that you always have the normalized data ready to react upon and ready to take action upon. All of it wrapped with privacy and security for both publisher and advertiser. CDPs that are typically going to be looked to follow GDPR regulations that are coming out in May of 2018. And the CDP that does this is going to be the go-to CDP that makes it happen. After it's all said and done, these first-party profiles, they go to enterprise data warehouses, they go to data lakes, and they allow the BI team to continue their analytics without interruption. At the same time, because this is a hub-spoke model, the CDP, a good CDP, will have dozens, hundreds, and even more than 1,000 integrations that allow us to push data out through tags, through APIs, through webhooks, through files, and through other databases, whatever it takes to reach the orange bar where a first-party data set and a segment can arrive at the vendor destination that it's supposed to be at. And that can be a BI tool, it can be a CRM, it could be a DSP, it could be a DMP, whatever the case may be. There are dozens of strategic marketing initiatives that a CDP can be automated to fulfill. And that's the key. That's what's happening here at the intersection. With the introduction of the CDP, the DMP, it finally has a means to enrich itself and more accurately target a user across the entire digital marketing ecosystem. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and I'll move over. Julie, if you could move us over to Q&A, please.
Yeah, we've had a lot of great questions come in, so let's just dive right in. First question, do I need a DMP if I already have a DSP?
That's a great question. DMPs and DSPs in the last 2 to 3 years have seen a convergence in the industry. And I'm speaking personally, but also through research that I've done on Forrester and Gartner. We've seen that these two pieces of software are starting to overlap each other. And I think the reason that that's happening is because the DMP was very narrowly focused on acquiring data and segmenting it. And it was a very important feature for the ad tech ecosystem at that time. But the minute that we got into programmatic buying and selling, where DSPs and SSPs were interacting, it became clear that the DSP was going to start incorporating a lot of those data management practices that we saw in the DMP. And true to form, some of these DSPs nowadays have the ability to collect the same type of data that the DMPs are doing. We could talk for hours about the pros and cons between DSPs and DMPs and which brands and which companies are actually doing and having the overlap. But suffice to say, that convergence is happening today, and a lot of companies are starting to understand that perhaps a DSP purchased first to see what it's capable of is a smart move, and then make a decision on whether a DMP is required. I've seen cases where DSPs and DMPs exist harmoniously, including with CDPs, all three of them. And I've seen cases where DSPs are just with CDPs.
Okay. Does the digital key ring maintain the user if the contact clears their cache?
Awesome question. I'm glad somebody asked that. A digital key ring, like we said, is something on the server side. So the CDP sitting and listening for identifying pieces of data, and you tell that CDP what people. In our case with Telium Audience Stream, direct about it, email, Facebook ID, Google ID, etc. Anything that uniquely identifies you. And once you give me authentication, once you log in and say, my name is Ted Mikas and here's my password, go, I stitch all of those keys together in a key ring. So what happens if I come back 3 months later and have cleared my cache, or, which is probably more likely, my cookie has expired, so that Google ID is gone. Well, the great thing about CDPs is it will see that it's me, it will see that my Google ID has changed, and it will update the Google ID identity ring. So the direct answer is no. The digital key ring will still be maintained if the contact, or should I say it's yes, the digital key ring will still maintain that user record if the contact clears the cache, because the cache has temporary identification data in it, not permanent data, such as email or Facebook ID. So the digital key ring is not only a place that stores permanent unique identifiers, it has intelligence to constantly refresh these identifiers should they change. An email is very unlikely to change. People use email for years, but if it does, in again and I see that it's you, and I see that you have a new email, I'll update your email key as well.
Okay, great. How do you see these platforms and the ad buying process changing in general with GDPR coming up?
Yeah, another great question. For those of you who don't know, the GDPR regulation originated from Europe in response to the population's demand for, and the two biggest aspects of the GDPR are consent and transparency. Every business in Europe or every business around the world who works with European consumers has to abide by the GDPR. The impact is tremendous, anywhere from 4 million euros to 20 for a penalty. So consent and transparency are huge. If you have European data in your systems, and that person says, I have a right to be forgotten, I want to click a button and I want you to erase my entire record set, you have to have the capability to do that. This is why the ad tech ecosystem has to have the capability to not only track users by their identifying pieces of data such as email, but also have to have the ability to engage with them from a privacy perspective. So it's not just about collecting data, it's the interaction with the user that signals whether I should get rid of their data or not. That's a new thing for a lot of most companies think, hey, I've got some data, I'm going to use it. No longer. You actually have to keep tabs on that data, and you have to audit trail from the moment you acquired it to where you sent it and what you're doing with it. And that's transparency. Ad tech ecosystem going to change. You're going to start to see companies demand far more clarity and audit capabilities of their data. It's no longer buying anonymous data and blasting out ads. You might have a data set in there that doesn't belong. And so you're going to want a lot more control and capability. And that's where CDPs are going to help out tremendously, because the CDP will always be linked to identifying people and also be able to interact with them in real time. One of those real-time capabilities is the right to be forgotten, is the right to say, turn off your advertiser tags, is the right to start running analytics on my persona. And so a CDP, because it unifies data collection and data enrichment, it's able to do those things. The ad tech stack, in my opinion, will change. Every company in the world is going to use CDP, and that's why our logo at Telium is every company needs a UDH. Universal Data Hub has a CDP within it, and we provide the auditing and clarity from end to end that you need. Okay.
And we've had a couple questions come in about where people can find more information on all of this. And we'll be sending out a link to these slides as well as the on-demand recording. And just this week, Telium actually released a new white paper on CDPs and DSPs, speaking more to the power of combining the two platforms. So you can go to this URL, telium.com/increaseadconversions to get your copy. And we will be sending out the rest of the resources as well. So thank you, Ted, and thank you to everyone else for joining us today. We appreciate your time and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.